I see this at so many companies. They have a lot of engineers and they wonder why, they have a lot of code but not a lot of product.
Code is not an asset.
So what did you do with the feature?
We killed it.
Did you tell them?
I hope so. Deleting code is amazing. It's like my favorite thing to do. Hi, I'm Paul Bigger, founder of Circle CI.
I'm Edith Harba, CEO and co-founder at LaunchDarkly.
And you're listening to Be Continuous, a podcast about continuous delivery and software development.
You can get in touch with us anytime at our Twitter handle @ContinuousCast.
The show is brought to you by HeavyBit. To learn more, visit heavybit.com. And while you're there, check out their library, home to great educational talks from other developer company founders and industry leaders. In this episode, we talk about the fear of shipping and whether code is an asset. So at the end of the last episode, Edith, you said, I think this was a quote from Yammer VP, the organization you design is the software you build.
Yeah, it was actually from the CTO, Adam Pisoni. And it really struck home for me because I see this at so many companies. They have a lot of engineers and they wonder why, they have a lot of code but not a lot of product. Mm-hmm. And it ties back to what you just said of specializing in the product management role.
Right. I think that this is a name. I think it's Conways Law. And the way that I saw that expressed is that if you're building a compiler and you have 4 different teams that are building a compiler, you'll end up with a 4-pass compiler.
There's no one vision.
Right. When looking at lots of different teams and team structures, the interesting one that I found was the Heroku one. And they have a language team and they have an add-ons team and they have sort of sharp delineations in their software and or in their stack that allows them to really focus on one particular area because there's such sharp demarcations between the different areas of the product.
Well, I think that's good if you're a fairly mature product. Mm-hmm. I think in the early days of Heroku that would not have worked at all.
I think so. They had this. I wouldn't say it's quite from the early days, but I mean, relative to now, it was quite early. I think they had that since Cedar, which was around 2010.
I just more meant when you're an early stage startup, mm-hmm. Sometimes you change your entire product.
Well, okay, yes. I mean, absolutely. I think once you get past the first stage of the product, and if you're able to draw very good interfaces between how your customers understand what your product is.
I don't know. I mean, I've seen this go bad in so many organizations where you have entrenched engineering organizations that care more about staying on their current project than actually about where the market is going. Mm-hmm. We've always worked on this, so we need to stay here because we don't know anything else versus being able to evolve to where the market is going.
Right. This reminds me a little bit of something that I'm working on at the moment. We brought in some UX experts to look at our app and to help us sort of transform it into something that was a little more usable, and they did a fantastic job, and I spent this afternoon reading some of the reports. But what was difficult was understanding where the product needed to be. Yeah. So for us in particular, there's not enough focus on the deployment. There's a lot of focus on the build, and there isn't really a sort of a broader look at what do engineers actually do when they're trying to do continuous delivery. And so we ended up with that what was in the product was redone in a really fantastic way, but there wasn't much affordance made for here's the thing that actually needs to be in the product. Yeah. And when you talk to customers, that it's hard for customers to tell you, oh, here's the thing that you actually need to be, or they look within the box that you've drawn for them.
Yeah, I say this because I had a similar evolution to you. I started off in engineering, mm-hmm. And when I was in engineering, it was very obvious what we should build next, extremely obvious. And so I always thought that our product manager was an idiot for not seeing it as clearly as me. When I became a product manager, I realized how myopic I had been as an engineer.
Can you give an example of what was the next thing to build that in retrospect was wrong?
I would see all the little bug fixes that we should be doing instead of the next big features. Or not even the next big features, but the next big product.
I think big or small or big picture versus small picture is a good way to distinguish these two. And I think that it's very easy when you're talking about product management to get the idea that product manager knows everything and that the engineer is just an implementer. And I think this is where a lot of the resistance to product managers comes from within engineering organizations, that the idea that they're going to be relegated to mere kind of peasants in the...
Code monkeys.
Code monkeys.
To use the...
There we go. No.
You know, nobody wants to be a code monkey. That doesn't sound very fun.
Right. I would disagree with that, but I think that's not...
Wait a second. We never disagree. So.
Okay. So
so this better be good.
Right. It is very frustrating trying to understand everything. And on the other hand, it's very satisfying to ship things and to get your stuff in front of customers. So very often the ability to just be a code monkey for a certain period of time is this sort of soothing feeling of just shipping software that fixes a load of small problems. I remember reading one of the famous GitHub guys. I don't remember which one it was, but let's assume it was Kyle Neath or something, that wrote that he spends a lot of time on big projects, and in between the big projects, he needs to find what is the next big project to work on. And it's often very frustrating, or very you go down certain rabbit holes and whatever, and you end up kind of not shipping things, or you end up getting frustrated or whatever. And what he likes to do then is just reach to the backlog and just take a bunch of small fixes. And he'll spend like 2 weeks of just like implementing very small things. You don't need to think about it, and it's cathartic, and it lets you ship. And so a couple of weeks as a code monkey, I think, is a very useful thing to sort of refresh the head and that sort of thing.
I agree, but I think nobody wants to do that full time. And I'll also challenge something else you said, which is everybody wants to ship. I think there are a lot of people who find shipping terrifying, and they'd rather keep holding stuff on until it's perfecter and perfecter and perfecter. Like, I've certainly been in situations like this where it's like,
right,
where
we can't ship because it's not perfect yet, or it's not complete.
Yeah, and as an engineer, you have this real battle of, well, what if people want this? Or what if they want this? Or this might be not quite right.
Yeah. The personal strategy that I use to manage that is to try to write the blog post that you're going to launch this with. And to... very often you'll be like, oh, I can't launch this because it hasn't got this feature. It hasn't got this feature. And in the blog post, assuming that you're going to tell people, how to use it, or you're writing the doc maybe, if not the blog post, you get that sort of feedback. As you're trying to explain to a user how to do this, you're going to say, oh, all you need to do is this. And you'll realize that this is, 7 steps long instead of 1 step long.
Yeah, the Amazon model. So at Amazon, they actually start with writing the press release first.
Okay, right.
And that's a really good guide back.
Right.
Because too often people do the other end of they've built this gargantuan thing, and they're trying to write a press release or blog post. They're like, whoa, right. We built all this stuff, but there's nothing actually to talk about.
Right. And part of that, and something which I think engineers have a difficult time thinking about, is how to get this widely in use. So you can build the feature, but it's no use to having built it if no one uses it.
Oh yeah.
So you need to build the breadcrumbs to it. You need to figure out the ways that are subtly hinted that this is the feature that you want when it's the feature that you want, and to draw people's attention to it. And sometimes that's putting it in docs, and sometimes that's doing a big announcement. But more often, it's trying to get the product in a place where the UX naturally implies the right path or the right direction for users to discover parts of the product.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of responsive design, and I think even more, and this goes back to why I started Launch Darkly, is you might have built it, but nobody might want to use it.
Right.
Like, you could have put all this effort into building it and done all these breadcrumbs that nobody follows.
Right.
So that's the idea that if you actually start doing the breadcrumbs first and see if people start following that path.
So with Launch Darkly, I'm guessing that the way that you see whether someone is using it is whether it's enabled for them. Is that right?
Well, no, what we do is we allow people to turn on features for certain users.
Right.
And just turning on a feature for a certain user doesn't necessarily mean that they start using it.
Right, exactly, yeah. So do you tie this to like mixed panel usage or some sort of analytics stuff?
We could tie it to different backends. Like we tie it to New Relic. We tie it to actually to Optimizely. So you could see if people are even, and we have our own internal analytics. Gotcha,
okay. Yeah, I mean, so this is the thing for me that I started a project recently, and the first thing I did is built the dashboards for adoption. And we're still at the stage in the project where there's no adoption, or there's tiny amount of adoption amongst the early users.
A trickle.
A trickle that you can't even see on the graphs. But it's
so a thing. So it's more like a fine mist.
A fine mist. But what you need to get to is you need to get to the place where everyone is using this. Because if you just build it, they're not going to come. They need to be told about it. They need to understand how to use it. And getting those first customers to using it and where it's deployed amongst them it gives you incredible feedback about how one actually ships that software to the larger customer base.
Totally agree. I mean, this is classic lean principles of just making sure some people can use it well before rolling it out further.
We discovered a part of the product that exactly 3 customers were using.
How did that make you feel?
Well, we didn't actually know it was a feature. So this was the idea that you could do deployments in parallel.
Oh.
So at Circle CI, we parallelize your build. And so the idea is that basically we take your test suite and split it across 20 or 50 or whatever machines. But it turns out that applied to deployment as well. And there were exactly 3 customers using that. And one of them had a valid use case for it. Out of thousands of customers, exactly one valid use case was there.
So what did you do with the feature?
We killed it.
Did you tell him?
I hope so. I think we reached out to that guy. There was another way for them to do it.
Yeah, and then the painful part of product management is also when you have a feature that you like to kill, but that a subset of power users loves. Like, so at TripIt, we were a mobile travel itinerary, but we let people do a printout. Mm-hmm. And one time we're like, oh, nobody prints anymore. Let's just kill it. Okay. It turns out that people print, and they really, really like printouts.
Right. I understand that, yeah.
Like, there's like, sometimes you're in particularly if you're traveling to a foreign country.
Yeah, you're not going to have internet, or your phone's going to be dead, or
you want to show something to a passport guard.
Yeah, or a local.
Yeah.
Yeah, without handing over your phone. Like, here's what I'm doing.
Yeah, so they were furious with us.
Right. So had you killed it at that stage?
Oh, we killed it. Like we were just like, oh, we didn't have good analytics on people printing because.
Okay.
So we just said, oh, nobody's printing, so let's kill it.
Oh, wow.
So our analytics later was that people complained. They're like, quite loudly.
And so had you properly killed it at that point, or had you merely, disabled it to see if it went away?
Let's see. We disabled it. I think we could get it back, but people were really, really upset.
Right. I like the thing of shipping something turned off rather than actually deleting the code, even though it's incredibly cathartic to delete the code and to hide it and remove it. But the turning something off with a feature flag is just a lot better way to sunset something.
Why do you think it's cathartic?
Oh, deleting code is amazing. It's like my favorite thing to do.
It's funny. My co-founder, John, he was from Atlassian.
Yeah.
And he said the winner of their hack competition was always the person who deleted the most code.
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Because that's what they wanted to reward is tidiness.
Yeah. It's very much related to the idea of product management and validating things and making sure that you don't build too much of the product. When code is not an asset. Code is an asset in the financial sense of it, in that you think you want it, but you actually don't. You actually want the best performance with the least amount of code / asset available.
Yeah, it's like so a friend asked me once, like, should I pay my developers more if they write more lines of code? And I was like, no. I was like, no. Like, that's a really easy metric to game.
Right. So we were talking about deleting features by feature flagging them. I think that this is an awesome way to delete a feature because it's very, very easy to get back. It's much easier to get back than a rollback. Rollbacks are this thing that nobody wants to do because they're very, very painful, especially if a ton of code has come in between. So if you ship something, or if you delete something by literally putting a feature flag in around it, and then you ship the code and then it's still on, and you turn it off for a certain amount of people, see if anyone complains, see that it still works, and that show it to 10 people, and then you delete it for everyone just by flicking the flag. And then if you get someone saying, we really, really, really need printouts, you can turn it back on for them while you have a think about what how you really want to solve this problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think feature flags is a really misleading term. Like, so feature flags implies that it's always on or off, when really it's more of a feature control. It's a way to encapsulate a portion of functionality such that you have total control over it.
Right, okay.
From the sunrise of it, from launching it to certain people, seeing their reaction, getting analytics, and then all the way to the end. As you said, every feature, eventually you want to kill.
So there's an interesting parallel here between feature flags and the sort of configuration variables. So by configuration variables, what I mean is in a Rails app, you often have a set of 4 different environments. So you have dev, test, staging, and production. And you often get in trouble in that you fill your code base full of if dev this, or if env is production, then do this. Because what you really want is you want to be able to say if we have enabled the X feature. If we're using SSL is one example of a thing that might be on in some configurations, but wouldn't be on in other ones. And in the closure ecosystem, there's this idea of a component where you build your application as a set of components, and all of the variables to components are passed into it. And the variables are essentially feature flags. Are things disabled? Are they enabled? What is the setting that is built on it? And it makes it very easy to compartmentalize functionality and to only expose like a simple interface that allows you control how the functionality works without necessarily having to dig into the functionality all the time.
That's exactly my vision for Launch Darkly.
Oh.
That everything should be controlled.
Right. You should look into the closure idea of components. It's a very sort of the closure people speak with in very sort of theoretical abstractions and that sort of thing, and they use weird words like complecting.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing, but they actually really know what they're talking about, which is even more annoying.
That's always the worst, right?
Yeah, so someone invents their own vocabulary and then they're right, and so you actually have to discover what they mean by this vocabulary, and then no one else understands the vocabulary. But so complecting is an interesting word in this case. It means unnecessarily tied together. It means that it's not complex, but it's two things that are like it's the opposite of simple, basically. The idea that you have two components and they're like they're too widely connected or complected.
Yeah. So what do you think is a better word than feature flag when really it's more about feature controlling or feature wrapping?
I used to feel that there were different concepts for feature flags versus A/B testing, and that they were actually different concepts, and I'm now convinced that they're the same concept.
I think so. This is interesting because I think A/B testing is just something that is enabled by having a wrapped feature.
Something say that to me again.
If you've wrapped all your features, as I talked before, you can launch them, you can monitor them, you can sunset them, and you can also compare them.
Right. Yes. So an A/B test is really a feature flag which is enabled randomly for a certain subset of customers, and you're looking at the analytics.
Yeah. So it's just an extension of if everything is an object and a nicely, as you said, wrap object, it's then you could say, oh, is this object doing better than this other object?
Right. Okay. The thing that I found really weird in looking at how people talked about A/B tests versus feature flags, and weird because those are the same concepts, but A/B tests are a marketing thing or a growth thing. You tie them to business goals or to KPIs or to funnels or something along those lines. And features, and especially the kind of operational side of features, you tie to database latency and basically operational metrics. But there's no difference between business and operational metrics. Every A/B test should be tied to operational metrics, because it's no good knowing, oh, no one buys on this thing if the reason no one buys on it is because the exceptions are through the roof.
Yeah.
And similarly, there's no concept of, this feature works really well if the database load is really low. Oh, the database load is really low because no one is clicking down that path, and your business metrics are through the floor.
You're absolutely right. I think one of the goals of Launch Darkly is to provide analytics on it and everything. I do think what I found when I was talking to customers is there's a lot of fear around A/B testing.
Okay.
Just the word, I think, has been overloaded. That people, I'll give Max from Heroku, who sits downstairs from us, they love feature flagging. They feature flag everything.
Okay.
But he doesn't think of it as A/B testing. He's like, if you said, do I A/B test? He would say no, because that implies that you're really doing more of a test of an old versus a new and picking which one is better.
Okay.
When really it's more he has a new feature and he wants to make sure the metrics are correct.
Right. Okay. So when I would advocate for A/B tests in the past, it was mostly to say, does this perform not worse than what was there before? So someone would have a new design of something and they think it's great, and we'd all agree that it looked, a lot better, but does it convert better? Or in fact, not even does it convert better, because if it looks better and it converts the same, we should definitely go with it. But does it convert not worse?
Yeah, the issue is most people don't have the traffic for A/B testing.
At a small, so you can make A/B tests work at a small scale.
And so if you're a SaaS company with maybe 300 customers,
Right.
you don't have enough volume to do A/B testing.
And
you
don't have
could be quite profitable and very happy with those 300 customers that are each like 100K a year.
So A/B testing is a test of statistical significance, right?
And
at a small scale, you need a lot of people, or to be able to tell small significance or small differences in the result. 5% versus 6%. You need a large number of people to have any confidence in the statistical significance.
So if you have,
you can tell the difference between 80% of people get through your funnel and 20% of people get through your funnel with 50 customers.
So if you say, that's if you have a feature that's used at the very top of the funnel.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to say is if you have something that people might not see very often, it's very hard to A/B test it.
Yeah, and it's often very hard to get
funnel, like you have your marketing site, which gets the most, you have your sign up, which gets the most, and then the further down you get into product, the harder and harder it is to do A/B tests.
And especially if it's something where where you don't have a funnel necessarily, or where you have a funnel but you haven't constructed a funnel. So one of the ways I think about software is that everything is a funnel.
Yeah. Life is a funnel.
Right. Life is a funnel. So hiring is a funnel. And so your jobs page is part of a funnel, but you don't actually have a Mixpanel thing built on your jobs page. And so making any change to your jobs page means that you don't actually know if it's had a positive effect or a negative effect. You can't really tell anything about it.
That's very true. But on the other hand, if you're getting only like one person applying a month anyway, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I mean, that's still in the realm of statistical insignificance.
Right. So you have no controls over something goes out. You just have opinions.
Yeah,
whereas on the homepage you can have data, and then on your jobs page you can argue that this word that we use here is really off-putting to female developers or something along those lines. But if someone disagrees with you, you've got nothing to back up your arguments either way.
Well, actually, so a company, Textio, now is doing a lot of statistical analysis of job postings.
Okay.
To see if they have, if the words in them are gender neutral or not.
And that's based across like a massive corpus of job pages versus...
Yep.
But it's not monitoring your actual throughput or something like that.
No, it's just based on, she's a machine learning PhD.
Right. So that works for something like gender or things that are diversity in the general case, but it's not going to work on are all the Clojure developers are they aware that this is a Clojure shop as an example?
And that's why you can't A/B test life.
If only.
No, I mean that would be horrible. You'd have to do everything 1,000 times.
Right.
And what if some of those thousands were just terrible?
Right.
I mean,
but you can A/B test web pages.
No, not if they don't get enough traffic.
Not if they don't get enough. Yeah.
I mean, it goes back to what you said. You can have throughput or latency.
Right.
You could test every page if you have 1,000 years.
Right.
But if you have a low traffic page, sometimes to go back to what you said before, you just have to go with, I feel this color is better. I feel this color pops.
And so this is one of the most frustrating things about developing software, that everyone knows that you should have data and analytics, and it's just very difficult to really have any idea of whether you should have analytics for a particular thing. You should have it on your funnel, you should be measuring what customers are using, but in almost every instance, you can make a justification for just doing it this way.
And you have to at a certain point. I mean,
and that's what's frustrating. If you could uniquely say, in every situation, we're going to use data, we're going to use the funnel, we're going to use these analytics, then you'd be in a great place. But where there are 90% of your web page or your product actually don't get enough use to get any statistical significance, and then you end up with only having a funnel on your sign up page. And then you don't really have a very data-driven company as a result of that.
Yeah, and that's the hard truth. I mean, there's still a lot of art in the science. Like, you just, at some point, you have to make a decision. Like,
unless you're at Google.
I'm sorry?
Unless you're at Google.
Yeah, unless you literally have the world's population using you.
Right.
You do have to make a decision. Like, I think our jobs page should look like this.
Right.
I think that our onboarding should look like this.
Right. Why? Don't know.
Other people did it that way.
I just kind of feel it. I think
So
this
is that
pops
an American
more.
accent?
No.
I thought you slipped one then.
No.
No.
I think this color pops a little bit more. I think that's what most arguments about UX end up with if you don't have high level principles and goals and personas that you're building the product around.
That's fair. And I think it goes back to what you said before. There's always this tension of data versus gut, and what we talked about engineers about making it perfect versus ship it now. Like, and I think they go together. Like, the more data you want, the more you can be convinced that now is the time to ship versus the person who's like, okay, it's just time.
Right. Yeah, when I'm trying to ship something, I try to make sure that my fears are addressed more than I try to make sure that the thing is feature perfect.
That's a really good way to look at it.
So when we shipped this feature that I've been working on, and it was just supposed to go to the first 5 customers. So what I wanted to do is make sure that the back end was shipped, and then I could test it on my own, on our own project, and validate, does it actually work at all? What does it look like when someone actually uses this in production? And the first thing that I really need to validate is, can I turn it on without causing any problems to everyone?
Yeah.
Or to me? And that meant that I had to make sure that there was no problems to anyone. So basically what I had to do with the feature was insulate it so that if it went wrong in the way that, the 1,000 ways that I couldn't expect it to go wrong, that I knew for sure that it wouldn't affect the rest of the customers.
So did you use a feature flag?
A feature flag, but also the problem in a lot of languages is it's not just a feature flag. You have to wrap the exceptions and make sure that the exceptions get caught and just like end nicely and versus going forward. So it was something that was on the critical path through everyone's build. So if the code went wrong, everyone's build could be affected. And so I just need to make sure no matter what goes wrong in this code base, let the builds continue.
The builds must flow.
The builds must flow. So what I was addressing wasn't, how do we feature flag this off? It was just like, can I ship this without being fearful of something going wrong?
I think you sum it up very well, fearful.
Right. I mean, the continuous delivery is mostly about fear more than anything, I think.
I think it's about mitigating fear, because it's very freeing that if you could turn something off at any time,
right,
you can move forward.
Right. And if you ship something and you know that it's not going to break things,
you could ship it.
Right.
I think it's when you have these big bang releases where it's everything all together in one kludge that you have a lot of fear.
Yeah.
I had a customer who said they stopped doing continuous integration, because it was faster to not.
Okay.
So they were just.
Let me just predict how this ended up.
Have you seen this movie already?
I've seen this movie so many times.
You saw
every iteration of this movie.
Every 1,000.
Yeah.
Well, how does the story end?
Oh, the story ends with software not being able to be delivered. Engineers quitting is a good or is a common ending, or at least last chapter surprise that like, oh, we're shipping so fast. No, we can't ship anything because it's so frustrating to ship things because we just don't know if it's going to work.
So so that's the end of the story. What's the next chapter?
After the end of this, what's the sequel?
What's the sequel?
The sequel is they bring in a new VP of engineering. The VP of engineering says, what the hell, there's no testing. And the VP of engineering sets up testing. Everyone complains about testing and that everything was much faster before testing, but they have to do what the VP of engineering says. And then in about a month, they realize their velocity is about 10 times faster than it used to be. And everyone who complained about testing is actually happy.
Yeah, that's what happened at our customer. They said they stopped doing testing because it seemed to take too much time.
Right.
They got to the point where they couldn't ship, and they're like, actually, this is the same as like, basic housekeeping.
Right.
You can't just not do your dishes every day for 2 months and expect.
Was there anyone fired on this journey?
No, they came to a pretty quick realization.
I think they probably got lucky there. People have been fired for less.
Oh, really?
Well, just if you're in charge of a software team and you bring out something that brings the team to a halt, yeah, maybe it'll occur to your boss that you actually didn't know what you were talking about in the first place.
I heard this legendary story that Salesforce, they got to such a state that it took them 2 years to ship anything.
Wow.
But they fixed it.
Okay.
They fixed it.
Right.
Because they realized this is a problem. It takes us 2 years to ship anything.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, it was fun catching up with you about product management and how to A/B test or not.
And whether A/B testing is the same as feature flags. It is.
Oh, Paul, we always agree, but not on this one. I would say that you can A/B test if you have feature flags, but I don't say you have to A/B test if you have feature flags.
I think this is just language. I mean, A/B testing is... So the way that I look at feature flags, we have feature flags that sit in a bunch of different places. We have feature flags of, do I enable this on this machine? We have feature flags for, do I enable it for this customer? And then we have feature flags for, do we randomly enable this across the customer base, and what proportion do we use? And they're all some form of A/B testing. They're all some form of feature flag. I don't see a distinction between them at all.
I think because in customers' minds, they think of A/B testing as some sort of statistical thing where they'll get a deterministic result, whereas sometimes they're using a feature flag just to roll out a new feature and expose it to some users.
Would you classify it as an A/B test if it's statistical and not an A/B test if it's not statistical?
So Paul, I actually agree with you. We
great.
always agree. I'm just saying I've talked to a lot of customers, and when you say A/B testing, it puts a lot of fear into them that they have to.
Right. So I agree that a lot of people see a distinction between A/B test and feature flag. I think my point is this. I've come to the conclusion that there is no distinction.
I think we actually agree after all.
Okay. Thanks for listening to this episode of To Be Continuous, brought to you by HeavyBit and hosted by me, Paul Bigger of Circle CI, and Edith Harbaugh of Launch Darkly.
To learn more about HeavyBit, visit heavybit.com. While you're there, check out their library, home to great educational talks from other developer company founders and industry leaders.